pjnet.tv, part 2. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, but our guest, our first-time guest, who is standing by in our green room, is not on the East Coast. He's on the West Coast, and he has a story to tell. So we're going to let him tell it. We are running our bumper. We're streaming. We're recording. Check all the boxes off. Yep, everything's looking good. So we'll start a countdown to Studio 20. Starting now. Well, welcome back, or welcome, as the case may be. This is pjnet.tv. I am Coach Prasick, and this is the most fun ministry I've ever participated in. I get to sit here and just listen to people's stories and how they're walking with Christ. Now, it's kind of cold in the room. As you can tell, there's an iceberg right out over there. There's an iceberg right outside the window. And I always ask our guests, send me a picture, if you can, to help you tell the story. So I assume our guest, by introduction, is Michael L. Richard. Now, it's important that to put that L in there. Why is that, Michael?
So there is a famous comedian who was on Seinfeld, who has an S on the end of his name, who's not me, who's much more popular in, I guess, a negative way. And so even if you type Michael Richard into Google, which is what I would say, you get him. And so you want to type in Google Michael, middle initial L, Richard, and then you'll get me, which is hopefully what you're looking for.
You're not the first person that has been on our program that with a similar story. One person uses their middle name or their maiden name, and of course that's helpful for Facebook so people can find you. But it turns out that without the middle name, there's she said a porn star by the same name.
That I don't have, which that's a good news thing.
Yeah, that's. Well, it always concerns me, when I found out that you were scheduled for the program, there were two things that concerned me. One is you're from California, and I didn't know there was anybody Christian in California. And
there actually are. Yes.
Yeah, but when I think California, I don't think that is a Bible Belt bastion and citadel of the kingdom of Christ. And then, of course, you're writing fiction, which always scares me a little bit because so many people call themselves Christian fiction writers when what they're writing really has very little has no Christianity. It's simply fiction, and they happen to be a Christian and they wrote it. So let's clear that up. You write Christian fiction.
I am a Christian who writes fiction.
Okay. So why are we on the program? How does your writing how do you walk that tightrope between being fictional and marketable, and at the same time introducing Christian themes and meaningful things in your writing? It must be tough.
So first of all, Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here. Hello to your viewers, to Catherine and Barbara and the others. It's just a real pleasure. Walking that tightrope. So my first novel is called Chosen's Beautiful Heart. And so kind of backing up, I'm an author, a husband, a father, a person of faith. Chosen's Beautiful Heart is my first novel, and it's loosely based on and inspired, even as it's fiction, by my wife's real life. My wife, Chani, I met her in graduate school in Washington, D.C. Her real story, and this again is fiction, she was born in Hong Kong. When she was 10, her mother took her on what was supposed to be a vacation to Rome, to London, to Germany. And she left her at age 10 to live alone in an apartment by herself. And she did not see her mother for a year. And eventually she came to the US and was adopted into an American family. My wife would never let that story be told, but she said, I'd done advocacy for about 17 years, and I thought after I finished my advocacy career, I'll write this amazing story, fictionalized. But God called me out of advocacy and out of AARP and opened the door to write. And my wife said, yes, as long as you fictionalize it. So my wife is my chief editor as far as like the first run, and she has made many, many changes. So how I walk that line is, first of all, I try to write as compelling a fictional story as I can. And then my wife reads it and says, no, you get to take that out. And then I will zigzag and come up with another fictional, vignette. And so it's been a really interesting and exciting journey. But the fictional part and how it relates to faith for me is it's really about the theme of the novel is it's about God is real and he shows up. And it's also a theme is that our family often doesn't look like we imagine or we expect. And in this case, her mother, the reason she did that and she left her alone is she was leaving her father for another man. And what happened was she also had mental illness. So that's kind of the answer.
Hmm. Well, it's now this you're still hunting around for a publisher, aren't you?
Yes, so the good news for me is after I taught myself after leaving advocacy, it took me 4 years to really reteach myself to write because I hadn't written since college. And as I made that journey, God just really opened up some amazing opportunities to work with an editor. I met my future agent, Dinah Flegel with Hartline. I'm represented by her at the Mount Hermon Christian Writers Conference. She asked me for the first 7 pages and she liked it and then said, asked me for the first 50 pages. And I said to my mentor at the conference, I don't have 50 polished pages. And so she said, well, tell her it's March. You'll get them to her by the end of August. And so I did. And so where we're at now in the journey is I'm really excited to find a good home for Chosen's Beautiful Heart. And Dinah Flegel and I are working very hard at that. And there's some real promising opportunities. And then I'm busy working on book 2, which is book 1 is the daughter's story. Book 2 is the mother's story who has the mental illness in her life journey.
Okay. So you're putting top spin on it. That's good, Michael.
Yes.
You've mentioned advocacy a couple of times. Tell us what advocacy is in your case.
Yeah, so it's really, and that's the thing that's really interesting for me is I've always worked probably for 17 years in advocacy, which meant advocating for fair retirement benefits or healthcare benefits. The last position I held, I was a lobbyist in California for AARP, and AARP has a really interesting story. Their original founder, who was a teacher, really feels very strongly about retirement security and about healthcare security. And the reason is she was a teacher and she found a retired teacher living in a chicken coop. And so one of the things that I had the opportunity to do is work with AARP for 6 years to help pass healthcare laws so that if you wanted to allow your 25-year-old child to remain on your health insurance policy, you could do that. If you had a child that had pre-existing conditions, they couldn't exclude you. And I thought I would just continue that kind of work. And then when the door closed with AARP, God opened the door to writing. And that was just a whole nother, and it's been a very exciting journey. So that's my brief take on advocacy and kind of that journey.
So you were a lobbyist in California.
Yes. Yeah. So what that means to be a lobbyist, it means you have to be registered. It means that the Secretary of State's office has to register you. It means you can't, I couldn't go buy a legislator or even a coffee without reporting it, if it's over $10 that I've spent. So there's a lot of rules around that. And that was an amazing and exciting opportunity. But I can see how God called me out of that and then called me to writing, because what he's now doing is I think he's really merging my interest in writing with my interest in public speaking. And it really relates to the gospel and faith, because my book is a faith journey, and God has given me lately some real opportunities to speak as it relates to faith, which is just a wonderful opportunity.
Well, for someone who is still looking for a publisher, you sure are getting some speaking engagements. I heard you on a podcast. You're off to a good start.
Yeah, no, it's God has praise be to God. God has really blessed me with he really so what happened, which is amazing, is I had left AARP and thought I'd go right back into advocacy. And it was only like maybe the third or fourth job interview where I came in second again for like the third time. And then after that, a job that I applied for, they closed the position. That suddenly it dawned on me, maybe God doesn't want me to go back to advocacy, and maybe He wants me to write a book. And so I went on a hike because I live in California, uh, near the Marin headlands to the sea, and just prayed about it. And I said, God, do you want me to spend 30 hours a week learning to write a book and 10 hours, looking for the secular job again? And that's what I did, taught myself to write, and God never opened the door for a secular job. And He's been so faithful in just providing the opportunity with my agent and, writing the first book and writing the second. So it's been just an exciting thing. And He's opened doors that I wouldn't expect, just like with your program.
Well, there are many doors, and so many people are wanting, to do that because, as our previous guest mentioned, the challenge publishers have changed.
Yes.
I mean, their role has almost been reduced to printing the book, you know,
Mm.
and,
Well, they
and
also want you to have a platform. Yeah.
yeah. But so much of the marketing burden has been shifted to the writer, the author of the book, and and I think that's given rise to new options, hybrid publishers,
Yeah.
self-published material, and I don't know how it's going to shake up. But the role of the publisher has certainly changed, and I think it will continue to change. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing because
Hmm.
um, there's so many things we can do today that were impossible. Well, not impossible. You couldn't afford it. You couldn't touch it.
Right.
What we're doing right now, 20 years
Yes.
ago would have been unthinkable.
You are absolutely right.
The idea of getting out there was you were at the mercy of radio stations, newspapers, op-eds, and television stations. Well,
Mm.
you got a lot of people clamoring for attention, and hard way to make it. But today we actually can, to some extent anyway, create our own voice, create our own television station or radio
Mm.
station. And radio stations, newspapers, and television stations, well, they're not having the best time of it right now.
Hmm.
Newspapers are all but extinct. Remember the Yellow Pages? You're old enough to
I
remember that.
do.
That used to be a big
Yes.
deal.
Absolutely.
The phone book, remember? Well, the phone in your home. Remember those where you had a telephone in your
Yes.
house?
I do remember that.
You had
Actually,
to.
I remember the candy bar big cell phones because I used to
Mm-hmm.
work trying to get people elected to the legislature. And at some point, I lost my candy bar cell phone and there was a rainstorm. And wouldn't you know, it fell right in the only puddle that was there. And so, of course, when I went back to find it, it was totally shorted out.
I remember the bag phone. I had one of those. Yeah.
I never had a bag phone.
Oh yeah, yeah, man. That thing would plug you plug it into your cigarette
Right.
lighter outlet, and if you didn't have your motor running, the battery would be dead in no time in your
Yeah.
car. I mean, they were
Yeah.
it was bad. It was like Vietnam having those radio packs on your on your back.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I always encourage our guests to send us any images that will help tell a story. And you sent this image of an iceberg, and I'm just at a loss, Michael. You're going to have to tell us
Right.
what the story is, or maybe you sent the wrong picture. I don't know. But what
So,
is this
yeah, I'll
iceberg?
tell you the story. Let me just, I will just, I'll read you the opening to this, and if people are interested, they can check out my site. What I realized is I could take the fictional idea of who is my wife, and my wife, as I said, is Asian and was born in Hong Kong, and compare her to an iceberg. So I'll just read you the couple of first lines. It's called "My Wife Is." My wife is an iceberg, massive, white, and cold. If that is your idea, then you have it all wrong. To begin with, my wife isn't white at all. My favorite picture of her is of us along the Monterey coast near Big Sur. So, what I do is I go on to talk about the depth of her faith in Christ, and that there's so much in her faith that is below the waterline, that's below what you see, and that's really the beauty that's really the glory of God. And so I take that image, which, is the iceberg, to draw you in, and hopefully you have then interest in reading it. And yeah, I don't know where that idea came to me, but it's one of the pieces I really like. So
Well, I hope that I hope it's not a copyrighted image we've put up there. But anyway,
no,
it's,
no, it's not. It's definitely not. Definitely a not copyrighted image.
you did not take that image yourself in California. I'm pretty sure.
No, I did not. Yeah.
That's great.
In fact, if I took it, my thumb would probably be in the frame.
Yeah, but that's a peculiar looking iceberg. You normally think of an iceberg as this boulder looking thing, but it almost looks like a rosebud of sorts. And
Yeah,
that
it was a striking image. Yes.
yeah, it's I have seen a few icebergs. I took a cruise to Alaska,
Yeah.
but they were not huge like that.
Right.
Nothing. They were really just chunks of ice floating around in the water. That
Yeah.
of course, when you're on a cruise ship, a chunk of ice looks pretty small. It's probably the size of a football field, but who knows? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You never can tell. Well, Michael, you've switched courses, went from advocacy, lobbying, and now you're in writing, and you've got one manuscript under your belt looking for a publisher, and you've already started on the follow up.
Right.
Gee, you've got a lot of years left. Is this what you're going to do now for the time you've got left?
That is my hope. So if you said what are the 3 or 4 buckets of things that I care about or that are important, I would put them in this category. Certainly finishing my first novel. I'm an author. Writing my first novel, moving on to the second, finding a good publishing home is important. If I look at my own life in a broader lens, a faith lens, is how do I live out my faith in Christ, both in my church or in missions or things that I do. And I really have a heart for that and for the gospel, or for supporting missionaries or sponsoring kids. Our daughter was adopted from China. And then the third piece is really my family. As I mentioned, my wife was born in Hong Kong. We have 2 kids, 2 young adult kids, Tim, who's 27, and Grace, who's 20. And then the last bucket, which is interesting, is really, it seems like God has given me the opportunity to speak. I had the opportunity to be involved in a writers conference in our church and speak. I've had the opportunity to do like television, like your show, or podcasts. And so I'm just really excited to see how God will link my public speaking, which I did for many years, with my faith. And it's going to be an exciting journey, and I'm looking forward to what's next. So,
Well, Michael, we are too. And
thank you so much.
I'm encouraged. That you have been able to accomplish so much, and yet, you've got that behind you. And a lot of people look forward to quote retiring, and
Hmm.
I never have particularly cared for that word.
Right.
And I guess I was influenced because my father worked 37 years for the same company,
Mhm.
and he retired and got a
Wow.
gold watch, and then 2 years later he
Yeah.
was dead. Now,
Oh, that's hard.
and I think that there's got to be something better.
Hmm.
But you've been able to accomplish much in your working and advocacy, lobbying, and such, and you are still able to turn the page and, well, really turn the book,
Yes.
and start an entirely new journey. And you're still younger and healthy. In fact, you're a pretty active, outdoorsy kind of guy, aren't you?
Well, what's interesting, so I think I mentioned this to you earlier when we talked, is our daughter has a condition called beta thalassemia major, which means she was adopted from China. She's 20 now, and she's very healthy, and she ran cross country, but she has an inability to make adult red blood cells. So that means she lives because kind people give blood transfusions to her every 3 weeks. She was a Make-A-Wish child when she was 12 and met Bethany Hamilton and learned to surf because Bethany Hamilton's younger brother taught her to when we got to go to Kauai.
Now,
But my
Bethany
wife
Hamilton, folks, is
said,
the girl that got her arm eat off by a shark,
yes, yes. And she's a Christian,
and
a
yeah.
really
Mhm.
strong Christian, which is amazing. And so my wife recently said, we'd like to give back to Make-A-Wish. And there was a hike that we were raising funds for, and many other people, to hike 21 miles around the Tahoe Rim Trail, which is between about 7,000 and 8,000 feet. And so doing that 21 miles, that was more than I ever thought I could do. And let me just say, I was glad I was able to finish it.
Yeah, that's when you realized you were out of shape after all.
That's when I realized I had to work really, really hard to get in out of shape.
21 miles is a long hike, but at 6,000, 7,000 feet, that's like
Yes.
walking 40, 50 miles because ain't much air up there. But it must
I
have been
felt like I was
breathtaking.
walking in the moon.
Well, it was breathtaking in more than one way, though, right? I mean,
Yeah. Oh, spectacular. I mean, you see Lake Tahoe, right? Yeah, it's awesome.
well, Michael, the future looks bright, and we're excited to hear what God is doing in your life, in your ministry, and I'm glad to hear that you're interested in missions because so much of what we call ministry, while good, can get too inwardly focused. And it's good to turn that light on out there and project it out there. And there are mission. In fact, when people ask me my occupation, if I'm joking with them, I'll tell them I'm a U.S. Marshal or I work
Yeah.
for the United States government. They ask what, and I say I'm a taxpayer.
Yeah.
But if I'm serious, I say I'm a missionary. And
Mm-hmm.
especially those
Right.
that knew me before say, huh? You know. But as I really believe this in all seriousness, if you are a Christian, you are a missionary.
Absolutely.
You have been commissioned as a missionary. The only question is how good of a job are you doing at it?
Yes.
We are
Yeah.
all missionaries. You don't have to have somebody appoint, anoint, or anything else. The Great Commission said, "Go ye therefore." And that means each one of us have been commissioned. In fact, we're even given the title ambassador. Can you imagine? Me?
Absolutely. That's
Gee,
yeah.
you got to be kidding. But that's the title we've been given. So I'm looking forward to seeing your future as it unfolds. And when that book gets a cover and a title and gets published, I hope you will circle up with us so we can put a book cover,
I,
back.
I would love to circle back with you, Mark. Thank you so much for the time and for your audience, attention. It's been wonderful.
Well, Michael, it's still early out there in California where you're at, but it's getting kind of late here, so we're
It
going to
is.
call tonight. You're probably just getting ready for supper, but
Well, that's true. Well, God bless you and God bless your audience and may God bless your ministry there, Mark.
Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate it, brother. All right,
Absolutely.
Michael L. Richard, as it was on the screen here on pjnet.tv. Well, that will wind it up for us tonight, but we'll be back tomorrow night. If you want to know who's doing what when, go to pjnet.tv. There's only about 4 things you click there. One of them's the schedule. And shout out to our producer, Barbara Byers, who schedules. And that schedule didn't just get there. She actually enters all the stuff, does the background research and all that stuff. There is so much that happens that's off the screen. And I just so appreciate her. And while I have a minute, I so appreciate the prayers and words of encouragement that I have gotten over the past few days. I got out of surgery yesterday. It was outpatient surgery, so nothing terribly serious. And I'm feeling pretty darn good. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it tonight, but obviously I did. So thank you for your prayers and words of encouragement. It means a lot to me. But you know what? I don't have to come out of the hospital to know who my friends are in the PJNet family, and I appreciate each one of you. And we pray for one another. In my devotional, when I get done, I pray for each of our PJNet family that is ever changing, ever expanding, ever growing, and there's so much good. And we got some new stuff coming up. By the way, we have a project that we have been called upon for vinewords.net, and you will see the result of that a week from today. Yeah, it's already done. Ahead of schedule. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it after that surgery, so had to accelerate, Anyway, we have so much fun. I love each one of you. Thank you so much. And I hope that what we do here is an inspiration and an encouragement to all that see and hear. And that is our mission, is to provide a platform for everyday Christians to share their walk with Christ. Got a challenge for you. Ask yourself these two questions. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done in the kingdom of Christ? Then ask yourself, when was that? The challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.